It always helps to start a meeting when you unmute yourself. Good afternoon, everyone. We are so glad that you're here. I'm happy to see a lot of familiar names in the list of attendees. My name is Robin Merrell, and I want to thank you for joining us to have a conversation about housing during this time of COVID-19. I am a managing attorney at Pisgah Legal Services, and I'll be moderating today's conversation, followed by a Q&A session. So if questions come up for you, just hit that Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen and type it in there. And it'll be my job to make sure that the panelists are asked that question. We will try to answer all the questions that we can within an hour. It's hard to believe that it was just a year ago on this date that we received the stay-at-home order from Governor Cooper. And here we are with so many things having changed. And while there is hope in the vaccine and a return to what used to be called normal, we also know that there are hundreds and thousands of people still in crisis. I'm joined today by Pisgah Legal Services attorney David Bartholomew, who specializes in housing matters, and Kiesha Lewis, a specialist from United Way's 211 call center. Unfortunately, Kendra Walker, a mother who had reached out to Pisgah Legal for assistance when she was in a difficult housing situation, was unable to join us today, but we will be sharing her story with you. Thank you to everyone on the panel for sharing your experience and expertise today. David, can you explain a little bit about the current policies in place to prevent evictions and help mortgage holders, including some new updates as of yesterday?
Sure, Robin. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Happy to be here. Yeah, Robin, yesterday, of course, we got some very good news from the CDC. There had been some rumors last week, but the moratorium was expected to expire on Thursday and it was now extended until the end of June. It is largely the same moratorium, though there are a few differences, which I'll try to talk about here later during the Facebook Live event. It still requires that renters submit an affidavit, submit a declaration that the affidavit that the moratorium applies to them. So we were hoping that there might be a shift in the burden, but tenants do in fact need to get the declaration and give it to their landlord and file it with the court if there is a court action. And you can find that declaration on Pisgah Legal's website, on the CDC's website. And so it's very good news. It is for non-payment evictions. It is a public health order. So what it does is it prevents non-payment evictions. It keeps people in their home where we need people to be to protect all of us. If you can't stay in your home, then all of us could be put at risk. So the reasons for the moratorium are public health based. It does not wipe away rent that is owed, but it does give us a few months to try to get some of the money, which was approved as rental assistance, almost a little over actually $500 million in total in rental assistance to be distributed through the states and then through the counties and cities and nonprofits like Pisgah Legal Services to get it in the hands of renters who need it and ultimately landlords who also are in need of this money. As far as foreclosures, I know that was in February, the Biden administration extended the forbearances until the end of July, the end of June as well. So even if you had a forbearance before on your mortgage, if it's one of the federally backed mortgages that is eligible, you can get another one, but it does create an affirmative duty, again, on the homeowner to request that forbearance again. So many people are having these forbearances expire and thought they would end in March, but they can get another one, and that will take them through the end of June.
Thank you, David. Kiesha, can you explain a bit about 211 and how it operates?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like David said, thank you everyone for being here. It's a lot of people. And so I'm really excited to be able to share what 211 does. So I like to explain it as a 24-hour information and referral line. And so it's accessible to everyone, anyone, any language. And so what we do is basically offer resources in the community that you live. And those resources can be rental assistance, utility assistance, food, transportation, legal services, any type of resources that are provided by government agencies, nonprofits, and also social service organizations. So again, we're 24 hours a day. No matter what time you call us, you will always speak to a live person.
Thank you. So my question was, you answer calls from rural areas as well as metropolitan areas like
Yes.
Asheville. Are there any housing issues that you find that are more prevalent in rural areas or more unique to rural areas?
So I would say kind of in rural areas, you might have a situation where a tenant is renting from somewhere, landlord, that is not more of a traditional, like they have a written lease. It might be a verbal lease. And so it's just kind of like a verbal agreement of them living in a homeowner's residency. And then unfortunately, sometimes the landlords may not want to conform in order to be eligible for the tenant to receive assistance. Another thing is that in those areas, internet access is kind of lacking. So a lot of these resources might require that you apply online for assistance, and people might not have access to the internet to do that. Another big barrier is transportation. So of course, a lot of these places previously were requiring that you actually come in and fill out an application. But of course, if you're in a rural area and you don't have a vehicle, trying to depend on public transportation to get to that place to apply is kind of a barrier for some people.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, Kendra Walker was not able to join us today, but as a follow-up, we will share with you a link to Kendra sharing part of her story on WLOS. Kendra came to Pisgah Legal for housing help through a special medical legal partnership that we have with MAHEC. Thanks to emergency assistance funds, Kendra and her children left a dilapidated trailer the landlord refused to fix and are now living in an apartment where their grandfather can stay and help out with the kids. With help from her family, Kendra has found a new job. She shared with us that while she still worries about the future, after everything I've been through, I'm not giving up. And that really just demonstrates the strength and resiliency that the people in our community have. Kiesha, many people have reached out to Pisgah Legal Services for rental assistance. Can you talk more about other available rental assistance programs and how to access those?
Absolutely. So of course, you can reach out to 211. And so a lot of our services are area based. So we are very fortunate in Buncombe County to have quite a few resources for rental assistance. And like I said, those programs come from government agencies, nonprofit, and also social service organizations. And then of course, we all know that COVID-19 impacted a lot of people that have never been in this situation before are now applying for resources that never had to call 211 before. So 211 is a part of a couple other statewide programs that do offer rental assistance for people that were impacted because of COVID-19. And then also if you unfortunately were evicted or you are now homeless due to COVID-19, there's also another statewide program that if you reach out to 211, they can get you connected to as well. But mainly it's just reaching out, sharing where you're located, and then we try and find what resources that are available to you. And we usually kind of do some eligibility screening ahead of time just to make sure that that person is eligible for that program and kind of direct them where they need to go.
I'm going to go ahead and ask you a question from the Q&A because it's relevant to what you've been talking about. And that is 211 referral assistance available in every county?
Yes, so 211, of course, I work for the 211 here in North Carolina, but 211 is a service that's actually available to almost 98% of all Americans. So you literally just dial 211, no matter where you are, that will get you connected to the closest call center to you. And a specialist, like I said, would be available to help you. So every county that you're in, and most of the counties, almost all of the counties, we do have some type of resource available for you in that county.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so in preparing for this lunch and learn, we did not know if the eviction moratorium would be extended or not. So I was supposed to ask what you would recommend to people facing the end of the moratorium. Instead, David, now that we have 3 more months of the moratorium, what are your recommendations to renters who are behind in their rent?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, we were gearing up for April 1st. Right now, I think there's a couple of things I would recommend that renters do. Number one is make sure that you've looked and gotten a copy of the declaration, that you've talked to an attorney if you're facing eviction, contact the Pisgah Legal Services to see to make sure that you're eligible and know what other benefits might be out there for you, what kind of rental assistance would be out there for you. The declaration, the affirmative duty for tenants to give the declaration to the court and the landlord is the beginning of those protections, and it is required. The other thing is if that your landlord is not accepting it or does file against you, that's what Pisgah Legal Services is here for. We're here to protect your rights and make sure that there are not illegal evictions, that landlords do go through the process and that they do respect the CDC's order. A couple of things that may be a little bit different about this new extension is that the administration has tasked the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau and the Federal Trade Commission with trying to enforce it. So, the order has been around since September, but many people had questions about what would you do if a landlord was refusing to respect it. Well, now you can go onto the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau website, and we can make sure that that link is sent out, and you can actually make a claim that your landlord is not complying with that. And if you have a larger landlord, of course, the FTC is going to investigate those things. So I think it may be that when we're seeing landlords aren't following the law, that there are a couple other avenues for tenants to follow up on. The other thing they're going to do is, of course, is increase awareness about it. They're going to send out newsletters, and they're going to try to help make sure that people do know about it. But with 13.5 million Americans recently estimated behind in rent, right now, we need people to try to access the resources, access the rental assistance, get your applications in. It sounds like a lot of money, 21.5 billion in rental assistance in the most recent plan, but it will go quickly. So we would advise people to contact 211, to contact Pisgah Legal Services now. Even though the moratorium sets things back and many people will not be evicted, it's important to act early to access these benefits and make a plan. Talk to your landlord, and the sooner you can start, I think the better off you'll be as we approach the end of it.
So David, conversely, what would you recommend for landlords, some of whom are probably pretty frustrated?
Yeah, and I mean, it's really tough. A lot of people rely on rent for their income. And one thing I'll say that is, I think, beneficial is, that a lot of the new financial assistance, the rental assistance, like I said, 21.5 billion, which is on top of 25 billion that came before it, it hasn't had a chance to filter down through. I think last I read, 70% or 65% of Americans have gotten their economic impact payments, the $1,400. So there is money that is starting to be distributed. And I think also one of the things that we're going to see as we see vaccination rates increase is that the economy may well come back here in Western North Carolina and throughout the state. So I think if I'm talking to landlords, I'm saying, try to be patient, work with your tenants. I think we can see a light at the end of the tunnel, and the money is out there such that, I think at the end of the day, a lot of people are going to be able to stay and enter new agreements, and we're going to have survived the pandemic by working together.
So for both of you, and Kiesha, if you will answer first, what are some things that the community can do to help?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing I would say is basically sharing information. So we get a lot of like landlords that actually reach out to us and actually want to get information and resources that they can share with their tenants. So they're being proactive because they know their tenants are in a hard situation. So they're making sure that they get information to be able to share with the community. And like David said, being proactive is like the biggest thing right now. Yes, we know that the moratorium is extended, but what happens at the end of June? You know, if the moratorium doesn't get extended again and you're still in this situation. So understanding, yes, rental assistance is available for you, but also realizing that you could actually call 211 for additional resources that might free up money that you would spend on food or on transportation or other things, utilities that you may be able to get assistance with through 211 to be able to put that money towards your rental assistance. The other thing is that there's great programs out there or resources out there. Call 211 just to make sure that it's in our database. Make sure that that's available that we can share with the community. And if it's not, you can just go on the nc211.org website and choose the tab that says agencies, and you can actually add your agency in there. But basically sharing of information at this point is really vital for our community.
And David, what do you believe the community can do to help?
Well, I mean, I am a big believer in mutual aid and, looking out for your neighbor and, certainly if you're getting the economic impact payments and you don't have something to do with it, or you've been okay, you've been able to survive the pandemic. I think looking at organizations locally who are working to combat not just homelessness like Pisgah Legal Services there, but also, organizations that are trying to increase the amount of affordable housing and things like that. I mean, the community just, Western North Carolina, I think we're known for coming together and supporting each other. That's kind of what we believe in. I grew up in Waynesville. That's kind of how we were raised, to look out for your neighbor and such. And I think it's more important now than ever. I mean, we're getting close, and I think people are excited and hopeful. And I know I am about, I don't know if we're going back to normal, but about a return to being in the community and being out there. But we really have to stay vigilant. We have to stay we have to realize that it's going to take time for everyone to get the vaccine, and that the economy is not 100% back right now, and that jobs have not returned completely. So we've still got a lot of work to do. And I think just making sure that we realize that we support each other as best we can. I guess that's what I would say.
So Kiesha, what gives you hope for the future in housing?
Honestly, I'm going to speak for like our area, for Buncombe County. And like I said, because we cover the whole state and we see the lack of resources in other counties, honestly, Buncombe County is blessed. Like, this is a great county for resources and getting access to resources. Like, if there is something that we don't know or we can refer to places like Pisgah Legal, where we work so closely with all these different agencies and share information. So I'm really hopeful that we're going to get to where we need to get to. I have no doubt in my mind. And talking to our callers every day, in spite of everything that they're experiencing, everything that they're going through, they're still optimistic. They're still hopeful. They're extremely thankful for everything that is available to them. And again, they're sharing information. Once they get information, they're sharing that with family members and friends as well. So I think in this area, we are truly blessed.
And for you, David, what gives you hope for housing?
Well, I mean, I think that you see a lot more people talking about affordable housing, and it really is a couple of separate issues. There's people at risk of homelessness, and then there's the amount of affordable housing for working people in Asheville. And I think there's a lot more attention being paid toward it. I see a lot more news articles. You see city council talking about it, and that gives me a lot of hope that because people are aware of it and people are talking about it, that there's the potential for solutions to a very difficult issue. And I mean, obviously, when it comes to the pandemic, to see the moratorium be extended, to see the government acknowledged that it's important for people to be able to stay in their homes, that we're not there yet. And the rental assistance, giving it time, the financial assistance to work its way down to landlords and tenants who need the money. So obviously with, with the vaccine and with the increased distribution that we're seeing, it gives me a lot of hope that, what looked like was going to be an absolute housing crisis, it may be something that we can get through, that our community will survive and maybe even potentially end up better off.
All right. So now is the time for us to move into the question and answer portion of today's session. And so far I have 7 questions in the Q&A line. And so I encourage you, if you're an attendee and you have any questions, please just pop them in there and we'll do our best to answer them. So the first one I think is probably for you, David. And that is Pisgah Legal getting 1,000 calls a week for housing issues?
I don't have the latest numbers. I do know that pretty much every time there's a new moratorium and the news coverage that follows, that Pisgah Legal is going to get a lot of questions about it. So I actually don't have the latest numbers on how many people are calling us, but yeah, I mean, there are people who have been behind in their rent for quite some time. There are people, who need to access unemployment and have been denied unfairly. And so Pisgah Legal Services, we are getting a huge increase in calls. And what we've done is we've tried to add staff. So we're able to meet the need, to meet people where they are and be available to both advise people through things like the moratorium and executive orders that have been issued and judicial orders that have come down. And also be ready, if and when there are a lot of evictions filed in Western North Carolina.
Kiesha, can you talk about the criteria for eligibility for the rental assistance programs?
Sure. So because there's so many, it's usually based on income. That's usually like the most common thing is income. Sometimes it goes by household size. And then for some of the COVID-19 resources, a lot of them are you had to have been impacted because of COVID-19. So that doesn't mean that, you automatically lost a job. It may be that you may have been laid off for a short amount of time, or your hours may have been decreased, or you had to quarantine for a couple of weeks and so you didn't receive a pay. Some of the programs are also saying if you have children at home now, that's considered a cost of living increase, because now your electric bill is going to go higher, your internet bill, and of course your food bill is going to be higher too with children at home. So those resources are you have to have been impacted because of COVID-19. But the other resources are really just a case by case. It just depends on the county you're in. And then each program has their own eligibility requirements. Most of them have to do with income.
So if someone finds out that they don't qualify for a particular program, should they just give up?
No, absolutely not. So that's what I was saying earlier, like definitely reach out to 211 because we're not there just to give resources, but we're also there to brainstorm. So you may not be eligible for that particular program, but we may be able to find a different resource or say, okay, you know what, let's see if we can get you financial assistance a different way. So that way you can free up some money for rental assistance. So I definitely highly encourage people to call 211 because it's not just as simple as here's a resource for you. There's brainstorming. Sometimes we're able to do advocacy on behalf of callers and reach out to an agency that they may kind of be on the line of eligibility, but maybe be able to speak on their behalf to see if there's something that we can do to help them.
Great. And staying with the theme of rental assistance, David, are landlords now required to give a copy of the CDC declaration to their tenants?
They are, yeah. If a lease termination is filed or they are going to file for eviction, they absolutely must provide a declaration, and failure to provide that is grounds for dismissal. And we are seeing judges dismiss summary ejectment cases where the landlord fails to do that. So, yep, the tenant has the duty to fill it out and give it back to the landlord and make sure that it's filed with the court. But landlords do need to do that if they're terminating.
And are landlords allowed to refuse emergency assistance funds?
Well, so that is a complicated question. I've certainly seen, some judges hold it against landlords for not accepting it. But that is one of the issues we've occasionally seen, is that there are occasionally landlords who are unwilling to work with them. But, to be honest, many times that really just does not work out well for the landlord. But in answer to your question, they are not required to do that. But we strongly encourage landlords to work with tenants here, to fill out the paperwork. It's pretty minimal what you have to do, and the checks, for the most part, go directly to the landlord. So it's a good way to sort of eliminate or at least reduce some of the losses that landlords have seen during the pandemic.
Kiesha, are you tracking calls for people who identify as homeless?
Yes, so under 211, if you actually call and listen to the menu, there's a couple of different options that you can choose. And one of them is if you are homeless. And so you kind of speak to a different team, but also if you were just to call 211 in general, we do ask questions like that. That's part of like a demographic like screening. And so we do usually ask like what their living situation is, if they're homeless, how long they've been homeless, what type of resources that they might be eligible for based off of where they live at.
And Kiesha, also for you, is it possible for landlords to access the rental assistance?
Yes, so there's, it depends again where they live at and where they're located, but there are some programs that do allow landlords to get access to funding as well. And then of course, there's mortgage assistance payments as well. And I do believe that one of the COVID-19 resources do help landlords get access to funding as well. And so what they would do is listen for on this the menu where it says COVID-19 resources. And then again, the screening will be done to see if they would be eligible for that.
Great. So I know that there are a handful of people on the call today who do work on the landlord side. Mm-hmm. And so I want to just, make sure that they know, call 211, mm-hmm. Listen for COVID-19 resources, and you will be assisted in accessing any resources that you may qualify for.
Yeah, I'll make it actually easier for you. If you call 211, choose your language option, and then just hit option number 4, and then you'll hear where it says COVID-19 resources. If you don't want to do that option, then choose option number 3, and it'll take you straight to a 211 specialist.
All right. David, can you describe what a forbearance is? You talked about that pretty early on.
Yeah, Robin. Yeah, so, it does, I want to not get technical with it, but basically what you're talking about with your forbearance for a mortgage is a freeze in payments. And most of the federally backed forbearances are not charging interest. But what it does is it sort of stops your payments from becoming due, and it gives you a chance to either come up with a payment plan, or in many cases, just start back where you were before. So many people with mortgages who were losing work due to the pandemic are able to get the forbearance. I am not a consumer law attorney. I do recommend, if you're in the situation, that you contact Pisgah Legal Services or you contact an attorney. I am seeing some specific questions, and we won't be able to answer the very specific questions today, but that's something when you're talking with one of us at Pisgah Legal or with an attorney, we can confidentially kind of assess the situation and ask those questions. But yeah, so generally a forbearance, permits you to not have to make that mortgage payment for a while, and then prevent foreclosure while that period is going on, and then kind of pick back up later.
Thank you. So I'm going to take a question myself. Some families may be concerned about public charge rules when it relates to emergency rental assistance. Is that something people applying should be concerned about? So for those of you who don't know what this question means, that applies to immigrants who are here without status and who may be seeking status. And the public charge rules have been done away with. So that is no longer a concern. There will be no penalty for someone who seeks status if they received a benefit. Most of the governmental rental assistance programs that I'm aware of are open to families of immigrants who are not documented. Kiesha, I'm getting some questions about the HOPE program. So there's two of them. I'll ask you both questions and you can answer, because I think the answer will be the same. The first one is, how long is it taking to get approved rental assistance from HOPE out of Landlords? And the second is, does Kiesha have any info on the HOPE program? Is there remaining money? What is the time frame for getting payments to landlords? I've had a couple of recent calls from anxious landlords wondering when they'll receive payments. So fill us in on HOPE.
Okay, so what I can share, of course, like I said, there are two different programs that 211 is a part of. So we're not over the HOPE program. We are part of the HOPE program. And so we do know that there was additional funding. We do not know as of right now when that additional funding is going to happen. I love the nc211.org/HOPE website. That is a great resource because there's a lot of updates regarding the HOPE program there, and then also stuff about the moratorium. The best option for answers regarding specific information with the HOPE program is, if you have a tenant who did apply, reach out to that tenant's caseworker. Every applicant is assigned a caseworker. And so that is going to be your best point of contact to find out specifically a time frame or any other information that you might have specifically about a tenant.
Could you give that website again, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's nc211.org/HOPE.
All right, and I put it in the chat as well, that people can access it there. We did receive a question about a very specific situation, and unfortunately we cannot answer that question. It is too specific, and doing so could cause us to enter into a attorney-client relationship. I would say to this person, you mentioned in the question that you are working with a property management company. I would encourage you to continue doing that. And they also may have an attorney on retainer who you might be able to speak with. All right, David. We've got a question here about what constitutes being a tenant. Specifically, what are the legal rights of people receiving mail and staying at a place, but they're not on the actual lease agreement?
Yeah. So again, that's a pretty complicated question. So I'll try to speak, sort of generally about it. But in North Carolina, to be a tenant, you don't have to have a written lease. You can have an oral agreement. And typically, the most simple way to understand it is if you're exchanging rent for a place to stay, you've created a sort of tenancy, whether you wrote it down or not. As far as the specific questions about getting mail, that's evidence of a tenancy, that somebody lives there, and that process would be required to remove them. You would need to go through the court system. There could be other factors too. So, it really, unfortunately, it's a question of law where you have to have all these facts and consider all of them to really answer the question. But I hope that's helpful. I mean, basically what it is it doesn't have to be written down. You don't have to have a written lease. But when you agree to pay money to stay somewhere, you're creating a tenancy.
Thank you. So next question, when will Pisgah Legal be scheduling another community training specifically regarding evictions?
Yeah, so I don't actually have a date for that. I think this Facebook Live event was kind of the first of many community education programs that we're putting into our annual plan from now through the rest of the year. One of the things we were kind of waiting on is to see if there was another moratorium. I'm glad that it was today. And so we could give you the latest information, the information that came out yesterday. So, but you can expect that working with our media team, and we will have other events. And of course, we're very excited about being able to go into the community and do presentations and community information, and be out there when it will be safer. And for a while, it's been very difficult to reach communities. And this is one of our attempts to do so. So I don't have a date, but if you stay tuned to our Facebook, to our Instagram, I think we have a Twitter as well, and of course on our website, you will see that we will be having events, and we will be talking about tenants' rights and keeping people posted on if there are other changes, if there are new developments, and what your rights are and how best to protect them.
All right, we've got what I believe is a follow-up to the previous question. Does, quote, payment to establish tenancy include cost sharing of utilities?
Yeah, I mean, these are very fact-specific questions, right? I mean, I would say arguably yes. And what I would say is it's probably going to end up needing to be decided by a judge. So, without knowing all the facts, I would say you've got a situation like that, you're going to need to go through the process of filing for an eviction and let the judge, decide this legal question, because it's right now, you could see arguments going either way.
All right. Do you recommend that tenants make partial payments as they are trying to catch up on back due rent? And are landlords allowed to refuse partial payments?
Another complicated question, but certainly part of the declaration that you sign if you're using the CDC moratorium, you're required to make good faith efforts to try to pay what you can. I wouldn't necessarily prioritize that. I would take care of make sure that there's food on your table, and that, you can continue to work so you can, catch up and pay rent going forward. So it's a very, individualized question. You are required to make the payments that you can. And, as far as partial payments go, again, that can depend on what the lease says and what the particulars of the landlord-tenant relationship is. But we're encouraging landlords to work with tenants to try to take those payments, to try to get through this pandemic so we can get to business as usual, or as close to usual as we can. But that question, again, it really it depends. And I know that's lawyers love to say that it depends, but it just is true in many of these cases. I could tell you, what I think, but there's something I don't know, or something about the factual situation that would actually change that. So best practice is to try to talk to us. If you've got an issue like this, you're a tenant, contact Pisgah Legal Services. If we can't help you, we'll give you some referrals to places that can. And, like I think Robin mentioned earlier, if you've got a property management company, go try to talk with a landlord, get a consultation, or talk to an attorney about how this works, because it really will be different based on your individual situation.
Thank you, David. So attendees, I have one more question in the line. So if you've got anything else you want to ask, type it up in the Q&A so we can get it answered. David, can you give a brief overview of the other areas Pisgah's involved in?
Sure. Yeah. So, Pisgah Legal Services, we have some services throughout Western North Carolina. And to go through sort of a list of what we do consumer law. So if you've got a creditor, or there's some kind of consumer fraud, or there's foreclosure, or you've been sued by a credit card company, we help with that. We do elder law. Anybody over 60, you should try to talk to us, because there might be a problem where we can help with wills, powers of attorneys. We have a very big domestic violence team where we help people protect themselves from their abusers. We do some custody cases in that area as well, and some family law. Obviously, I'm part of the homelessness prevention. It's pretty clear we do that. We have a health justice team. We connect people to the best insurance plans that are out there. We are out in our communities, at hospitals, meeting people where they may have legal needs because of that led to a medical problem. So we have a couple of medical legal partnerships here in Western North Carolina. We do benefits, disability, unemployment. We do some food stamp cases, and obviously we've got a team right now dedicated to Medicaid expansion and helping people familiarize with that process as it plays out here. We have some veterans law. We have a community economic development program that is sort of looking at solving some of the larger issues here, like affordable housing and wages. In Western North Carolina, we have an expunction program. And I might be missing something, but basically a good thing to know is, like, we're in Western North Carolina, we're helping low income individuals, people who couldn't afford an attorney otherwise. And if you've got a civil legal problem, you should consider going to our website, applying online. The worst thing that can happen is we can say we don't do that, but we do have connections with a lot of attorneys in the private bar. And sometimes if you qualify for our services, we can connect you even for an issue that I haven't really mentioned. So I guess I hope that sort of answers what we do here.
Thank you, David. I also have a question. Are you involved in the big picture of immigration? And more specifically, I'm interested in what you were doing with the Hispanic community in the Asheville area. So I'm not going to answer that question today since we are focusing on housing, but to the person who asked it, I would encourage you to reach out to either our Executive Director, Jim Barrett, or our Development Director, Ali Wilson, to talk more about what we are doing with immigration and working with the Hispanic community. And because we are doing quite a bit and it's very important work. The next three questions are really all from the same person and kind of rolled into one. And that person is wondering, what do we anticipate will be the effect that the pandemic has on the availability of affordable housing in the short to medium term? So I'm happy for either one of you to take a stab at that.
I mean, it's hard to predict the future. You know, I think affordable housing is a national problem, but it also is specific to localities and what we can do about it. You know, I do think that we've seen one of the effects of the pandemic is people can work from anywhere. And so that's bringing people to Asheville, which, you know, without an increase in housing stock and more development, then it, you know, it could lead to making these things harder. On the other hand, you know, we could have a lot of growth, economic growth that might, you know, bring the wages up. So it's really hard to say. And I'm open to either of you, like trying to crystal ball. You know, it's been a problem before the pandemic, right? People are very, you know, cost burdened throughout Western North Carolina, and some of them extremely so, where your housing prices, your mortgage or your rent is too large of a percentage of your income. And so you're really just one thing away from, you know, being at risk of homelessness, from losing your home, from being evicted. And this pandemic, you know, it's been that thing for a lot of people. We've seen it. A lot of our clients kind of struggle with that. I still have a lot of hope, but it's going to take the community coming together. It's very hard work. You see it in big cities, you see it in rural areas, where to you know, control for all of the different interests in our community. A lot of people want to keep Asheville the way it used to be, and I relate to that. But we, you know, I think we have to realize that this problem requires collective action and to work hard together to try to increase the amount of housing that's out there for people and increase the wages so that people can afford it.
Do you have any thoughts on it, Kiesha?
Like David said earlier, I believe he said about awareness. I think this pandemic has brought so much awareness to the need for affordable housing, especially in our area. We get a lot of callers that, like David said, a large portion of their income goes to rent or housing. And so, you know, at 211, we are able to somehow capture the need for housing. We can show when there's not a need that's available for our callers for housing. But I really do believe, not just with the housing portion of it, just with a lot of what's going on with the pandemic, so much awareness is going to be made. And I know, at least for 211, our information is shared with decision makers in the community to let them know the need is there. Like, for sure, it's there. There's people who never needed assistance before are definitely needing assistance, and realizing that the cost of housing in this area is extremely high.
Absolutely. David, what big picture work does Pisgah Legal do with housing and homelessness prevention?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, we, first of all, you know, we try to advocate with stakeholders, with community leaders, with state leaders. You know, Robin is very involved in some statewide coalitions to make sure that our leaders, our elected leaders, know about the problems that we're facing here in Western North Carolina. So we're looking to make, you know, we're looking for political possibilities and solutions to these problems. We also, you know, work closely with the Community Economic Development team. You know, I am on the board of directors for the Asheville Buncombe Community Land Trust, where we're looking, you know, to try to make permanently affordable housing here in Asheville. And Pisgah has very much supported that work. we look for projects that increase affordable housing. I feel like there's a lot of big picture projects, and Robin can probably tell you even more about some of those things. But we are not just on the front lines in the courthouses helping people with evictions. We're looking to make sure that less people in the future are facing evictions.
Yeah, it's a dream of mine that we go out of business because no one needs us. But for that to happen, we certainly would need a much larger stock of affordable housing and much more justice and equity than we currently have. But like one of the things we're doing is we're examining the details of the American Rescue Plan, the most recent bill passed by Congress, to see what opportunities there are within those funds going to cities and counties to increase the supply of affordable housing and the necessary infrastructure for the construction of affordable housing. So we are planning some meetings with local governments to have some of those discussions. The next question is, what is the latest homeless prevention assistance available through PLS, and what is the criteria for accessing those funds? So currently, we have had our program on a pause so that we could do the work that we needed to do to catch up on a very large backlog. When that is over, the funds that we will have available will be the City of Asheville CDBG funds. And so that means that a person would need to live within the city limits of Asheville. They would need to have a legal case with Pisgah Legal Services. And then the attorney assigned to their case could work with them on accessing those funds. We hope to open that program back up in the near future. And we are incredibly grateful for the extension of the moratorium to give time to get those funds out to people. Taking on financial assistance was something that we have been honored to do. But we take that responsibility very seriously. And it is a large administrative burden when you are accounting for government funds and how they are used. And so the final question that we have right now is, are you seeing landlords close facilities? Is anybody going out of business?
I don't think we've seen any of our larger landlords or mid-sized landlords. I actually haven't heard of that happening. And, because of the protections, the foreclosure protections and things like that, a lot of the smaller businesses have been able to either get PPP loans or use the forbearances to sort of delay their payments and their financial requirements. So I haven't seen it. I'm sure that landlords have been struggling. I'm sure it has happened. I haven't encountered it.
Kiesha, have you heard of anyone going out of business?
A lot of our landlords that call are like individuals, they might have like a few homes. And we generally try to get them access to resources or make them aware that, they might be waiting on a tenant to file for some assistance. And so we also get them connected to additional resources that they can apply for as well. So a lot of it is just understanding what resources and information is available to landlords as well, because we hear a lot about tenants and we don't hear a lot about landlords. So just getting them access to information.
Okay, those are all the questions that we have. There is an attendee with their hand raised. However, I am not able to actually dialogue with you and have you ask your question out loud. So if you would please type your question into the Q&A, then we would be happy to answer it. And I can give you a couple of moments to do that while I thank our panelists. David and Kiesha, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. You have a great deal of knowledge and expertise and compassion that you bring, that you brought to this conversation, and that I know that you bring every day to your work. I would like to thank all of the attendees for joining us on the Housing Lunch and Learn, and we hope that this gave you some information for yourself or your community. If you're in need of assistance, please reach out to community resources such as Pisgah Legal and 211. To access the 211 call center, you just dial 211 on your phone. And it's really exciting to hear that that is true 98% of the United States. You can apply for Pisgah Legal Services online in Spanish or English at www.pisgahlegal.org, or you can call our main number at 828-253-0406. If you are able to, if you can, we ask that you consider making a donation to support our homelessness prevention program and the work that you heard about today. Personally, I've been working in that program for 20 years, and it's never been as bad as it has been in the past year. And I have never felt more needed, and I have never felt more grateful that we are here to assist the people in our community. But our work is only made possible through community support. And if you would like to give, you can go to pisgahlegal.org/give to make a donation. If you're have any questions, just feel free to call our main number and we'll talk to you about how you can do that. So I did not get any more questions. So we will adjourn. Everyone be well and stay safe. And again, thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
everyone.
Robin.
Bye. Thank you, Rob.